67th presentation. Growing up in India, the Bata shoe brand, I believe it's French, that brand was ubiquitous throughout Kolkata. And the North Star style that is shown here was very, very well known. I remember I had a brown pair. And if you look forward to the world of movies, if you're going to be chased by a crop duster, Indiana is the place to have that happen to you. Cary Grant and Eva Marie Saint shown in the movie North by Northwest. So another book and movie reference, East of Eden. And there are many more directional references that are going to be coming up in the beginning of our presentation today. So here's another one. What do we have here? The British boy band, One Direction. The lead singer, I'm going to point now, he was one of the principal singers there. He has a very successful solo career now. That is Harry Styles. A song by the singer Haley Steinfeld called Wrong Direction. It's about teenage angst, as you can tell from the name of the song, the title. So let's assume it's all about heartbreak. And we're going to counter that heartbreak with belly laughs from the series South Park. It's a good one. Sometimes raunchy, even better. We have direction in music. In this case, East versus West Coast jazz. The melodic West Coast jazz versus the bluesy East Coast. And in terms of food, what do we have in here? Avocado toast, so symbolic of West Coast cuisine versus, for example, the signature cuisine from the East, which is avocado roll. I'm sorry if I'm letting people in. I set the setting in a mistaken way, so I have to manually let everyone in. So please forgive me when I do that and I get distracted once in a while. But as far as, let me see what is happening. As far as food is concerned, Chicagoans, and I know quite a few, are very religious about hot dogs, whether you allow ketchup or not. And the way to go it, you don't allow it. I am so sorry. There are people waiting in the waiting room. What is going on here? I don't know how to access this today. I messed up on this. Voila. You see this. Please forgive me today. I said it wrong by mistake. So in terms of Southern hospitality, we do have Southern comfort. And as far as food is concerned from the South, the first time I was in Nashville, I was served fried chicken and waffles with bourbon maple sauce. No. If those of you haven't eaten it, it's delicious. But I remember my gut reaction was, because it was bourbon maple sauce. Why are you ruining my bourbon? I'm glad they did. It was really good. But as far as this goes, regionality in food is a global experience. So the very decidedly non-vegetarian North Indian cuisine versus the mainly vegetarian South Indian ones. And what is shown here are the signature rice cakes, the idlis, which are ubiquitous throughout South India. Direction again, Chicago's South Side baseball versus the Northern Cubbies. I have my preference. The pronounced directionality of Chicago. Whenever one hears drive towards the lake, it simply means you're heading eastward. Michigan Lake is a pointer. And now, the very sophisticated version for the term that we used to use, third world. The more updated, sophisticated version is to say global south, because they're both indicating regions that have low economic development. It's still a pejorative as far as I'm concerned. But as the story continues, in places in the global south, for example, places that I'm from, homeland is Kolkata. Some of our worldviews differ from that of the third world and the first world, right? There's a big difference. So for example, you're wondering, why is this picture here? When I grew up, I never grew up with those Western advices like a way to a man's heart is through his stomach. From the land of Kama Sutra, we suggest go further south. So, where do we go from that point? A very warm welcome to everyone. Thank you for sharing your afternoon with us, because the Nourishment Projects is about joyous curiosity. This is meant to be fun, and it's always being part of something much larger than ourselves. So here are some of the references that inform this presentation. And the term reference is very important, and it is going to steer today's narrative. Reference implies a relation of one to the other. And as one can see, and hopefully I'll be able to establish as we go further, the world over, a seeker ponders, how far am I from where I need to be? And there's always someone helpfully guiding. Over there, just take a left, or perhaps, as they say in life, straight ahead and stay right, because these rights and lefts are very important. And for reference's sake, imagine this Pac-Man video game screen, because it's going to help set the way the narrative is going to go. So the Pac-Man avatar is here to give directions. So if I were to tell it, go straight and turn right, that is exactly what it does. It goes straight, and then, because it's facing that way, it goes up, which is the right. But if in this scenario, by any means, our happy little avatar comes out, goes straight, hits the wall, and is reoriented, then if it turns right, it ends up somewhere completely different. It is not the desired location that I wanted it to go to, right? I wanted it to go up. And so go right, go left, all of this is not always the most efficient way of giving directions. These directions work if the distance you're traveling is small. Since many of you live in Chicago, I took an example from the Maps app, Google app, to go from Chicago's Water Tower to Walton Street's Rosebud restaurant. And you can see in the direction here, Google will give directions right on Chestnut and then take 2 lefts. Now, the same Google software will transfer to cardinal directions of east, west, north, and south when asked to cover long distances. So from the same beginning Water Tower, if I were to ask for directions to go to my favorite bakery, Three Tarts, which is up in Northfield, look at the directions. At that point, it is not going to be rights and left. It switches over to the cardinal points. And that distinction is important anthropologically, for it indicates cardinal points did not begin when you have small societies, when they are not traveling too far. So if you are only traveling in small distances, cardinal points are of no use. So for example, when we go to the tribes like the Amazonians, such tribes will not use east, west, north, south for directions. Most likely, they'll use natural markers, some singular tree or changes in topography. If there's a river that takes a fork, they'll say, go to the end of the river and head up or head down. Tribal traditions take cue from nature, and I find them to be mostly charming, because they'll tell you things like moss is growing on the north side of a tree. And sometimes in areas like the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, they tell time by when the morning flower opens or when a certain bird starts to sing. It's really beautifully done. So even in the Amazon, which is vast, cardinal points do not show up because of space only. They are different things, nor does it show up by population. The determining factor of cardinal point is something very different. The main factor is, did the community travel a lot? That is the determining factor, because large-scale societies isn't the determining factor. Kolkata, where I grew up, where I was born, has a population of 15 million, nearly 15 million. It is full of congested roads and some roads that are less congested, and you have a myriad of transportation options. Yet all the drivers, be it for the buses, the trams, the rickshaws here, and we call the rickshaw drivers rickshawalas, in my vernacular, which is Bengali, I can assure you, never will they be using cardinal directions, east, west, north, south. It's not going to happen. Right and left, go straight, location markers suffice for all these drivers in all these places. They do not say, east, go left. It's always about referencing, connecting the place to something or someone. Their directions really will be like, go straight. And when you get to the corner sweet shop owned by Uncle so and so, take a left. And that uncle so and so, it's honestly, that's how it's done. It's always relationship. So that uncle so and so becomes part of the cardinal direction of regional travel. It's set, it's a very different setup. It's all about connecting the directions to one from the other. It's a very personal relationship. What happens when you approach vastness? When you have things like emptiness, these concepts of right direction or wrong direction fall asunder. Because really, how do you find guidance through things like these shape-shifting sand dunes? Because there are no markers here to adhere to, is there? The dunes here, which you see now, will change topography in minutes the moment the storm comes in. But yet, ants, the ones here shown in Namibia, look how they're lighter colored ants. They reflect light to deal with the heat. These ants know exactly how to go back home when they're foraging for food. And why is that? It's thanks to their inbuilt magnetic positioning information system in their brains. And ants aren't the only ones. Numerous animals have evolved the ability to detect Earth's magnetic field, and they use it to guide their movements over a variety of spatial scales. Massive coverage across our Earth. Birds do it, as do water creatures, and they use Earth's magnetic field to stay on these migratory pathways. It's important, isn't it? How do you guide in the dark? So, for example, one of them, the sea turtles. Sea turtles aren't using east, west, north, south for guidance. So these reptiles, they lay their eggs on this land. The hatchling, these turtles emerge from these underground nests and they scramble across the breach to the sea, and they undertake long distance migrations that in some populations of these turtles can cross entire ocean basins. And though we are not going to go into the details, these animals have remarkable navigational strategies and they use strategies. As shown in this picture, when an animal intersects an isoline, which is a magnetic isoline, obviously, the creature knows which direction to travel along that isoline to reach his or her final destination. The correct direction is a matter of life and death for these creatures, definitely for the turtles, because many of them return to the area where they were conceived, where they were born, to reproduce, and that concept is called natal homing. Some travel immense distances before eventually navigating back to the approximate area, or actually, to be quite truthful, for some of them, to the precise location of their birth, where they had begun life, and the circle of life continues. Turtles do this, as do salmons. They're red colors because they're about to spawn, and they return to their birthplace to spawn and die. And though this is a relatively new field of exploration, a fascinating discovery was that magnetic fields for ancestral migration can persist over generations, even when the salmons are being bred in the farming areas. So if they were not in the wild, you captured some, you start breeding them in these salmon farms, they will remember their ancestral grounds. So it's, it really seems that these ancestral breeding grounds, this concept is inherited even when they are bred in captivity. And I was really moved by that. This idea to inherit a sense of home. Where do I belong? To have that written in my genes, somehow I find that incredibly moving. So spiny lobsters have a remarkable homing ability, and they can reorient even when displaced to unfamiliar areas. And they're also the only invertebrate who really know true navigation, which is an ability to determine positions relative to a goal, even when they're put, like I said before, in unfamiliar areas without using any cues. It's really, it's really a burgeoning area. How do they do all this? Another creature, along with the sense of smell, because they have a remarkable sense of smell, sharks also navigate using Earth's magnetic field, and they use magnetic signatures. Because what they do repeated circling, as do penguins. So the repeated circlings that the sharks do during the annual migration, due to that, they seem to remember the field. And so they use it as a navigational marker on subsequent trips. They know exactly where they should be turning to get to their feeding destinations. Isn't that something to see? As below, so above. Migration of birds. The distance they travel is staggering, and the perils they withstand is harrowing. I couldn't fathom when cranes travel distances. Some people shoot them for fun. Why would you want to do that? So the way that the birds work, they have magnetosensitivity in their eyes, and that's what they use to navigate these massive distances they travel. They also navigate using help from the heavens, the constellations. We have a lot to learn from our feathered kinship. For example, I wanted to point these out because everyone knows how much I love nature. These godwits, they look like nondescript birds. These aren't like birds of paradise, but they're remarkable. Their breeding grounds are in Alaska, and their annual migration takes them to New Zealand. So imagine the distance they traveled non-stop. They only stop on the way back. So en route, when they're coming back, they stop at the Yellow Sea. So the Yellow Sea is a critical way station for millions of migrating water birds. Yet relentless development along the Chinese and South Korean coastlines, it is shrinking the habitat for these birds where they used to come to feed and rest. And what is true for these migrating godwits are true for birds everywhere. I just want to show an example. Human development is a challenge for bird migration. City lights, Chicago is fault in here, is a problem, and we need to address these very responsibly. Flamingos, all sorts of birds, pretty and small and large, they navigate using their organic cardinal directions. And not just birds, other winged creatures include the bees. Actress Angelina Jolie had done a campaign about 3 years ago, I think, to draw attention to the urgent need to protect bees. So bees, like sharks and turtles and salmon and godwits, use magnetic navigation to go back to the hives. We use magnets as well for direction. This geology fascinates me because all these creatures, organically using magnetic fields, or people like us, where we use the compass, we need help. We use our intelligence. The earth just is the most remarkable thing. So this is obviously a snapshot. The crust, the outside crust where we live, is about 19 miles deep on average when you count from land. And if you're measuring from the ocean bottom, it is only 3 miles deep. So the next layer, the mantle, and these are the inner layers. The mantle is a hot, viscous mix of molten rock. That is about 1,800 miles thick. So the designated yellow outer core, that is about 1,400 miles thick, and it's composed of molten iron and nickel. And then when we get to the solid inner core, this is roughly about a little less than 800-mile thick solid sphere of iron and nickel metals. And what surprised me, this is as hot as the sun's surface. I knew it was hot, but I didn't know it was that hot. So, behold, beautiful power. And it's power for sure. And this is not fragile beauty. And this beauty has a great purpose beyond forming new landscapes. because it is the motion of this molten iron within the Earth's core. So we're only seeing the outer core here. It is this inner bright that is outside all of this that is moving. It is this that generates the magnetic field that all these creatures use. And it is this same magnetic field that protects our planet from cosmic radiation and the charged particles like the solar flares that is emitted by our sun. So at Earth's surface, the magnetic fields form two poles, the north and the south magnetic poles. They have opposite positive and negative polarities, just like a bar magnet. It is because of our magnetic core the Earth spins, but the Earth does not always spin on an axis running through its poles. It wobbles once in a while, irregularly over time. One of the many reasons it's wobbling is because of loss or gain of water mass. And this loss of gain of water mass has been often due to glacier melt, happens due to evaporation, happens due to ocean current, and some relatively new research is showing it also might be happening due to excess groundwater depletion. This affects the east-west wobble in the Earth's spin axis. And so as this Earth spins through our solar system, so we rotate on our own axis and we are spinning around the sun, this magnetic spinning provides the magnetism needed by us to navigate ourselves using a compass. But look, outside our atmosphere, when we head off to space, there is no magnet for guidance. There are no magnets out there. The moon does not spin. It has no magnet. At that point, what you're using is plain old 3D Cartesian systems. It's that knowledge that you use, NASA uses, and all these space stations use to navigate. Again, a referential system. So instead of a compass, spacecraft sensors use the sun and the stars, just as our ancestors did, to determine the craft's orientation relative to the coordinate frame. So in the larger picture, again, it's all about connection, relationship of one thing to another. All these stars, that's what they're using to calculate as they go out into outer space. Starlight, star bright, indeed, isn't it? And one of the brightest stars that we know. It is this bright star, the sun, that undergirds the human, our cardinal direction system. The sun, and it is her consistency, always rising in the east, that provides the reference for the remaining cardinal directions, north, south, and west. Because once you know where east is, you can figure the rest out. It's all relation. Navigating by the sun, this is a timeless idea. We've used it forever and we can always use it. It is so reliable. But what happens when the sun sets? Again, a timeless tradition, celestial navigation. It is at this point the constellations provide reference just as it does for the birds. Because these constellations, the Omega, the Perseus, what is it except storytelling up in the sky? You're seeing mythology in the sky because our ancients, how did they refer to it? They took what they knew, relation. They connected their life onto the heavens. Knowing our times, we'd probably name the constellations things like, Sinatra, Kardashian, or Beyonce, things like that. Either way, as long as you have a relation to it, So people that we can collectively reference, that's what was done then and constantly going to be done now. Because you can buy and name yourself if you like. I don't know why you would want to. There are so many things to be discovered. You can really pay someplace and have something named after you. Have a go. So some of the better known constellations are being shown here. The reason I'm showing it in the small way, because the problem with this is these constellations move seasonally in the northern and southern hemisphere. All of them move except one, Polaris, which is the North Star. In the dark, it is consistent like the sun. And this North Star, in India, it is known as Dhruv, or in my vernacular, Dhruvo. This North Star I don't even have to point it out. I'm sure you can see which one it is. It is the backbone of celestial navigation. It is the only star in the night sky that does not move. Consistency matters in all things. It hangs right above true north. And if you really take a moment to think about it, where would explorers and colonizers be without this level of consistent guidance that the North Star provided? You know, this is a made up picture because you're not going to have birds flying in the middle of the night. They have better things to do, but it gets the point across. It's the importance of these celestial navigation patterns and not just history. These things have played a great deal in our history. And as we go into space exploration, this idea of relativity, the references, these same systems are going to really impact our future. This cannot be emphasized enough. And this worked, this navigational direction, cardinal directions from the night sky, from the heavens, and the sun was not just for conquerors. When the Maoris came to New Zealand, which is now known as New Zealand, I think they came around the 10th through 12th centuries, 12th century CE, current era. They came from Eastern Polynesia using the sky as a guide, and they knew how to read the swells of the waves and the winds to figure it out. So the language of the remote past, again, lacked what we call cardinal directions, east, west, north, south. But these people, in this case example, the Maoris, they carefully observed the night sky. They were careful about reading the ocean currents and the local weather patterns such as the winds. And the winds have played a very crucial role in directionality in many cultures. Romans, the Greeks, because these all used for trade because they were shipping everywhere. You have Roman trades going on with India. That's why they're known as trade winds. That's where the term comes from. They had to wait for the monsoon season to be over because when they went for trade, you arrive somewhere and you wait out there for a few months before the wind changes direction and then you sail back. The idea of trade was longer and it was an extremely different organized way of it. This is not Amazon shipping overnight. So again, this idea of wind's perfume mythology. Here in Botticelli's painting, Primavera, on the extreme right is the wind Zephyr. At least he's depicted in here. So Zephyr is the west wind, and he's the son of the goddess of dawn. So I like that. The goddess of dawn, the eastern goddess, the sun is the western wind. And you see Zephyr next to Chloris. Along with the west wind, here's the relief of the north wind in the Greek mythology, Boreas. But directions play a vital role in global mythology. In India, the marriage of Lord Shiva to his consort Parvati. And in one story, Shiva had mistakenly beheaded her son. To appease her and resurrect this child, Shiva had decreed, "Find for me the head of a creature who sleeps facing north." That creature happened to be an elephant, and so the child's head had been replaced with the elephant's. And you likely have seen that reformed deity. And I included this picture for a friend of mine, Merle, because she likes Ganesh. There you see Ganesh right there. He is the first deity evoked in all Hindu rituals. The prayers start off with Om Ganeshaya Nama. He is evoked in the beginning of all celebrations, everything he's evoked. So, because that elephant happened to be facing north, he was beheaded. And I tried to look up why is that. But the internet is not always reliable. Someone said somewhere, I think on Quora, it's because the magnetic fields affect your mental state. I'm like, okay, whatever. But that was the reason given. Perhaps it's true. But the direction north has significance in many places, not just in India. The direction north is married to the importance of Egypt's Nile River because the Nile flows north. Starting from Tanzania, it goes through 10 countries in the continent of Africa. And there are countless examples of rivers that flow northward, including Florida's St. John's River. But the example that I want to bring up now because the directionality is very important in China. I want to bring up the river Yangtze, which actually flows east and west. It's pointed out in this map. So why am I bringing this up? Because the Yangtze defines two major cities in China. It used to be historic capitals. One is Nanjing. The prefix Nan indicates south. So Nanjing, South City. Conversely, Beijing, the term prefix Bei indicating north. So again, cardinal directions are all about reference. North and south in reference to what? Well, as you guessed, the Yangtze River. So you can imagine it's flowing through here. Beijing is north of the Yangtze. Nanjing is just south of the Yangtze. And so why did this happen? Because the kingdom moved north to Beijing due to Mongol invasion during the 9th and 10th centuries onwards. So Nanjing, again, is just south of the Yangtze. But this capital has moved back and forth many times. Even in the early 20th century, during the Republic of China, which is about 1912 to 1949, the capital was Nanjing, not Beijing. So it goes back and forth. And the more you see it, the reason I'm hinting this, because there are a lot of art lovers here, they will say, Northern Sung ceramics are better than Southern Sung. Says who? Because that was not the capital back then. It's important to know where these terms come from, and language is going to become more and more important because the subject of cardinal directions has quite a few surprises. And as I indicated, especially on language, not just English. And you can very well guess we are skimming wildly today because it's my firm belief, if it piques your interest, please feed your curiosity. The internet allows you to research and then go to the libraries and do in-depth research. Your curiosity will be richly rewarded. So as an example, this is the archaic Chinese symbol for east. I think they used to also use it for day. So if you break this pictogram, this I'm going to point now, this boxy little shape, pronounced Ri, is the shape of the sun. And then so if you take the shape of the sun and you see it is, this little shape is almost like a tree. It is showing the sun rising along the horizon. And the tree is in front of the sun. The details are marvelous because it's depicting distance, that the sun is way far back, far away from you. This is how they are depicting east, far away, far in the distance horizon. Behind this tree, up rises the sun. Isn't that lovely? Again, quickly, reference matters because as I was, one of the main reasons I love researching, it opens me up, expands my understanding. So this Chinese perspective of the Middle Kingdom, the most powerful kingdom, Middle Kingdom. Why is that? Because the Western vertical concept, from that perspective, middle is not the most powerful. The top is. But from the Chinese view, if you take the three-dimensional view, the middle, the central node, is the supreme power, without which everything crumbles. So it's that shift of direction. We think vertically, oh, why is middle the most powerful? Because they're not seeing it up and down. They're seeing it in a different way. So if you imagine a network of powerful nodes, the apogee is in the center. The most obvious one being a spider web, right? So though diaphaноusly beautiful conceptually, this idea of the Middle Kingdom, the middle apogee, is the most powerful. This idea of a powerful middle does not resonate with me, with my sense of spiritual cardinal directions. Because if you really think about it, implicit in the term middle is the concept of boundary. You are bounded if you have a middle. My universe expands unbounded, and I am positive so does yours. When you look within, you're not bound by anything, and you're definitely, your expansion isn't symmetric. You will grow in different ways. So why would there be any middle when you are an expansive spirit, unbounded completely? This concept of middle powerful somehow doesn't resonate with me. But anyway, as far as reference and cardinal points are concerned, Language and cardinal directions go hand in hand. The reason I'm showing this is from Lascaux village, the Lascaux one up in France. The terms right and left preceded north and south, because again, when you're a small scale, non-nomadic society, they will say, go right, go to that tree, and then take a left or go up. They're not going to say east, west, because they had no reason to have any of this, because they didn't travel that much. So right and left preceded east and west. The terms up and down preceded, in an analogy, north and south. So why did east-west come first? Obviously, the point of reference for east, point of reference for the human history in every way, starts with the sun, the source of all power, all creativity. Sundials guide our lives in so many ways. Here's one. And this concept of gnomon, the shadow from the sun, has been used to predict weather patterns for agriculture. We were a nomadic society, then we become an agro society. It matters deeply. So essential was it for all growing cultures. It was the gnomon that predicted the annual rise and flow of the Nile. And the Nile is the wealth of Egypt. That is why the gnomon, this idea of, you see this area right there, that is what is the crowning glory of the statue of Isis. And Isis is one of the most powerful goddesses in ancient Egypt. You see the sun rising. It's the shadow she will cast that'll help predict the flow and the tides of the Nile, which then sits there and allows them to fish, grow the fertility of the Nile, the linen, everything. It is only when Rome captured Egypt that it really became a powerful, powerful civilization. The extra taxes that they collected allowed the Roman citizens to go and splurge on silk. Hence comes the Silk Road. Huge implication of the wealth of Egypt. Anyway, back to the main cardinal direction of this. Sun worship is critical in the story of Akhenaten, an Egyptian central point. And obviously the opera is being shown here. The sun set the direction of her people in Egypt. And not just Egypt, really. The sun has set the spiritual cardinal points throughout human history. The sun and the bright star. According to the book of Matthew, I think it's 1:24, a bright star led the Magi from the east until it stopped, and I quote, over the place where the child was. And again, quotes, upon entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. Again, direction. 3 wise men from the east. Direction matters also in the religion of Islam. Not so much the sun. What matters is no matter where the Islamic mosque is, the devout Muslim worships facing the mihrab, which is what indicates in every mosque, it is that which points where is Mecca, which happens to be in Saudi Arabia, and this is the epicenter of the annual Hajj pilgrimage. Devout Muslims, once in their lifetime, will gather for this Hajj. They will go to the Hajj. They will gather at Mount Arafat, where the Prophet Muhammad delivered his final sermon about 1400 years ago. And every mihrab, which is again that doorway, globally faces Mecca. And for the longest time, as Islam was spreading, as they spread up north, all the mihrabs used to face Mecca. Mecca happened to be south. And over time, human memory, they just associate the mihrab with the south. And then when Islam started spreading to the east and west, some of the mosques, especially in areas where the architects didn't get lazy, they just forgot. They associate mihrab means south. And so they pointed the mihrab facing south. And it should not have been. It should have been facing west when they started spreading towards India and all those places. They made the mihrabs facing south, so it wasn't facing in the right direction. It wasn't facing Mecca, so they had to face all that. I love stories like this, the lived experience of humanity. So this is where the mihrabs face the Mecca. It goes without saying, the cardinal direction for a Muslim is faith. They come to the Hajj pilgrimage and they circumambulate the Kaaba, which is the central, this dome-looking structure, 7 times, counterclockwise. And just love the idea that the devout is pulled towards the Kaaba as if inside a huge magnetic field. That power and protection of faith can be as powerful as the magnetic fields of geology of the earth that protects us from solar flares and cosmic radiation. As initially indicated, I hope it's coming across why I'm saying it's the reference that is the fulcrum for today's narrative. Context of one to the other. To bring the story home for me, your attendance at these presentations supports our educational not-for-profit, the Nourishment Project's NFP. All our volunteered workshops marry philosophy with the arts and science. So currently, one of our high school sessions is built around the story Frankenstein. This picture, because we do it on Zoom, is from my class yesterday. What the children were pondering. They first learned that the discovery of electricity had inspired the story of Frankenstein, because they were doing these testings during those days. There's Dr. Galvin, from where you get the term Galvanism. You know, he sparked a frog and the frog twitched. And so it became such a big thing for them. And so they think, oh, so Mary Shelley and her husband, eventual husband, Lord Byron, were up in this villa in Switzerland, and they were storming, so they had to come up with stories. They had a contest, which is when she wrote the story of Frankenstein, because she had heard this body twitched when electricity was put in there, because we have electrical impulses. And so this idea became, how do you bring life into the lifeless? That was the genesis of Frankenstein. And so the children were asked to introspect. How does a product of Dr. Frankenstein's science experiment, the creature, how does it find meaning? How does it find meaning to become human? Because we'll be taking all these children to see the Joffrey Ballet production of the Frankenstein, but they research and they study before they show up so they can have an even more meaningful experience. And so really in the story, how did the creature, remember at that point when first created as a fully developed being, so it didn't grow up with empathy, it had nothing, blank slate. How does it find, what does it mean to be human? Well, curiosity. It seeked knowledge. The creature read a bunch of books, some of them depicted here. From Goethe's Sorrows of Young Werther, learned about unrequited love, learned about moral virtues from Plutarch's Life, and so on and so forth. So the children who were there were about 70 of them, they were asked, what is the essence of being a human? What direction led that creature that Frankenstein had created to find self-acceptance? Because the creature looked hideous. When you're hideous, or even if you're not, these questions that come up, who am I? Or in that case, what am I? Where did I come from? This directionality in this vast existence. Where does one go in search of one's own identity? Because each of us, you know, it is rather vast when you're quiet, in our own inner sanctum sanctorum. What is our cardinal direction for determining who am I, or whichever questions come to you? In the story of Frankenstein, the creature's guiding force was the desire for companionship. That's what the creature wanted. To be human, he wanted not to be alone. Isn't that relatable? In whom does he, or any of us, who is our home? In whom do I belong? And Tagore is a Nobel Prize winning poet from the country that I'm from. One of his poems guide me all the time. They're my cardinal directions, one of the many. One of the stanzas had said, as I look on and on into the past, in the end you appear, clad in the light of a pole star. My cardinal direction, my North Star, constant, unwavering. You can guess it. Love. That I find myself in you, come reside in me. That is the cardinal direction that I think directs all of us as we spin through existence. As always, I thank you for your time and I wish you joy.